Of all the deceptions that have been foisted upon Christian people down through the generations, I think the worst may be the idea that nothing is required of them for salvation. As one person put it, salvation is Christ plus nothing. Christ plus nothing. At the most basic meaning of the word salvation, that's true enough. Whenever we are sinners and we're lost in sin and sin is taking control of our lives, we can't get ourselves out of it. It is the grace of God. It is the work of His Son, Jesus Christ. It is His intercession for us that reaches down in this world and saves us. But I fear there is another level of meaning where this is a long way from the truth, that there is nothing required of us for salvation. Because salvation, and the word salvation, is used at a different level by many people, and they're talking about the ultimate salvation of victory over death and the resurrection from the grave. And I'm going to suggest to you that to tell people that nothing is required of them to come to that point is a serious mistake. One of the reasons is a short passage in Luke, the 14th chapter, that I think is crucial. Jesus was going His way, and there were crowds of people following Him. And He turned, it almost as though the crowd is behind Him, and He turns around and faces the crowd, wondering as though, why are you people here? But He turns around and He says this, if any man come to me, this is in Luke 14, verse 25, if any man come to me and hate not his father and his mother and his wife and his children and brothers and sisters, yes, and his own life also, he cannot be my disciple. Now, that's a profound statement, and there's some really troubling things in that short statement. The first thing it tells us is that there are circumstances under which it is not possible, based upon decisions that we make, it is not possible to be a disciple of Jesus. Therefore, something that we decide, some response that we have, is going to be involved in it. And if it's not, because if we don't have those responses, not that we can be an inferior disciple of Jesus, we cannot be His disciple. It's right there. It's on the page. Now, the other thing that's troubling about this is He says, if any man comes to me and doesn't hate his father and mother and his wife and his children and his brothers and sisters and even his own life, he can't be my disciple. Now, I have heard some fancy dancing around the meaning of the Greek word. The Greek word means, love less by comparison or something. I'm sorry. The Greek word means hate. It means hate in the simple way that we in English use the word hate. Now, I don't think that Jesus meant literally that we should hate our mother and our father and so forth. And so, but to play around with the Greek words is not necessary. I think what we need to understand is that Jesus did not mean this literally, so obviously He meant it figuratively. And if He meant it figuratively, then we have to try to understand what it was that He meant by this statement. And it seems clear enough when you read the context of this, and when you read the whole of the New Testament, is that there is absolutely nothing that you can put before God, before obedience to God, before Christ, before obedience to Christ, that you must, by comparison or an analogy or in a manner of speaking, you must hate these things in comparison. That is, if any of these things are in your way, if any of these things are an inhibitor, you must grow to hate them. You must pull away from them. You must, by your actions, make the break with them, if that's what's required for you to be a disciple of Jesus. And if that is required, if you're not willing to make that step, you cannot be His disciple. Now, then He goes on to say something else I think that's very profound. He says, whoever does not bear his cross and come after me cannot be my disciple. He doesn't explain what that means. But basically, each one of us has a burden. Each one of us has a cross. Each one of us has a challenge that we're going to have to face. If you don't pick that up and carry it, you can't be His disciple. So being a disciple of Christ is going to go way beyond any idea of merely the way we think or the way we feel or what we believe, unless you understand the word believe to include what you do. That you cannot truly claim to believe something if your actions betray that belief. But But the fact of it is that somehow along the line you've got to pick something up and carry it. If you don't do that, I'm sorry, you can't be my disciple, says Jesus. For which of you, intending to build a tower, sits not down first and counts the cost, whether he has sufficient to finish it? Lest haply after he has laid the foundation and is not able to finish it, everybody that sees it begins to mock him, saying, look, this man began to build and was not able to finish it. So, before we then become a disciple of Jesus, we are admonished to count the cost. What does this imply? Doesn't it imply that there is a cost to being a disciple of Jesus? So we're not just talking about thinking, we're not just talking about feelings, we're not just talking about belief in an abstract way of some divine being up here somewhere. We're talking about something concrete, something abstract. And you must count the cost, because it is going to cost you something to be a disciple of Jesus. You can't be a disciple of His free of charge. This is what He says. And so consequently, before you decide to follow Him, you should count the cost. So this suggests that salvation may be a free gift, but it also says that there is a cost. What can this possibly mean for us? He goes on to say, of what king going to make war against another king sits not down first and consults whether he can with 10,000 men meet him who's coming against him with 20,000? You just simply weigh this thing in the balance and say, can I do this? Am I willing to do this? Am I going to do this? He says, and otherwise, while he's way off, he sends an ambassage and desires conditions of peace. So likewise, and here's the crux, whoever he be of you that forsakes not all that he has, he cannot be my disciple. So this is an active decision on your part of forsaking something, not just something, all that he has. He cannot be my disciple. Now you can water that down as you might, and it's still right there in the Bible staring at you off the page. If any man comes to me and hates not his father, his mother, his wife, his children, his brothers, and his own life, he cannot be my disciple. There it is. Salt is good. But if the salt has lost its savor, wherewith shall it be salted? It is neither fit for the land, nor yet for the dunghill. Men cast it out on the ground and trample it underfoot. You got ears? You'd better hear this. I think the analogy to be drawn by this is salt is a good thing, but it's got to be useful. So is belief in Christ a good thing. Trust in God is a good thing, but it has to be useful. A Christian is a good thing. To be a Christian is a good thing, but you have to be useful as salt. When it has no use, it's just simply thrown out and not kept. Now, there's a passage of Scripture that I'd like to take you back to in Matthew 19, because it once again throws this challenge out in front of us. And, no one, I believe firmly in grace. Ephesians 2, by grace are you saved through faith. It is the gift of God, not of yourselves, and not of works, lest any man should boast. All that I believe firmly to the core of my being. At the same time, though, Jesus tells us there is a cost, there is a requirement. You must be willing to forsake all that you have, or you can't be His disciple. We've got a problem. Something we have got to hold in the balances and weigh and try to understand, where does this idea take us? Well, one day there came a young man to him, Matthew 19, verse 16, and said, Good master, what good thing shall I do that I may have eternal life? He said to him, Why do you call me good? There is none good but one, but's God. But if you would enter into life, keep the commandments. Now, how hard is this? Along comes the young man and says, I want to have eternal life. Jesus said, Oh, I see. Well, if you would enter into life, keep the commandments. This is expected. And he says to him, which? As though there might be some question in his mind. Jesus said, You shall do no murder, no adultery, you shall not steal, you shall not bear false witness, honor your father and your mother, and you shall love your neighbor as yourself. The young man said, I've done all that from the time I was a youth. What is there that I still lack? Now, it's interesting to me that Jesus on this occasion only lists the last 6 commandments. He doesn't deal with the first four in his first statement to this young man. He just said, you want to enter a life, this is what you have to do. And it's fascinating because Christianity, basic Christianity, has very much to do with the way people treat people. It has to do with what you do relative to the people you come into contact with every day of your life, the people you live with in your home, the people you deal with in business. This is what basic Christianity is all about. But the young man had to feel that there was one thing more. There had to be something more. Jesus said, well, if you would be perfect, go and sell what you have, give it to the poor, you'll have treasure in heaven, and come and follow me. Now, I don't know if you've thought about this or not, but this last statement takes us to the other four commandments without mentioning them by name. He says you've got to be willing to forsake everything you have and put me first. Come, follow me. Now, I was reading not long ago an interesting book because it's a book that was a little report on it was review of the book was done at the feast and one of the sermons at the feast by Ron Smith. It was, do yourself a favor, love your wife. And as I read through the book, I found what I considered in many cases to be platitudes. In other words, the guy uses the kind of Christian jargon that you are so familiar with in a certain vein of Protestant theology. But as I read along, he began to cite some scriptures out of the Living Bible, and they really struck me because what Paul and others were saying was that what you have got to be prepared to do is to accept the authority of Jesus Christ over your life. To accept Christ, to accept Him as Lord, to accept Him as Master. You see these words, you hear these words all the time, and they are words. You call Jesus your Master and Lord. You say, well, that's okay, but that's just words. The question is, at what point does this impact your life? When are you going to be prepared to give up yourself, to give up everything you have if necessary? Jesus said, and come and follow me, to do what I say, to put yourself under my authority. Because this is the core element and the core value of Christianity is the acceptance of Jesus Christ as the authority over your life. What does that mean? It means you do what He told you to do. Now, later today, tomorrow, and always. And that's what He's talking about when He says, look, if you're going to come to me, and you're not willing to forsake your wife, your husband, your mother, your father, your own life, you can't be my disciple. Because you've got to give it all up and be prepared to follow me in every aspect, every facet, every moment of your life. In the flesh, this is what I expect of you. You have to accept His authority over your life, all of it. Go and sell what you have, give it to the poor, you'll have treasure in heaven, come and follow me. When the young man heard that saying, he went away sorrowful, for he had great possessions. And Jesus said to His disciples, I'm going to tell you the truth. It's hard for a rich man to enter the kingdom of heaven. It's easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to enter into the kingdom of God. When His disciples heard this, they were amazed, saying, well, who in the world then can be saved? You have to understand that in view of the prejudice of the time. That wealth was considered a sign of God's blessing, poverty was considered a sign of God's curse. And so that wealthy people had to be in God's favor or they wouldn't be wealthy. And therefore, if the wealthy aren't going to make it, well, where are the rest of us going to wind up? Jesus said, with men this is impossible, with God all things are possible. And Peter answered and said, look, we have forsaken everything and followed you. What shall we have, therefore? In truth, they had. They left their job, left their family, left their career, left their homes, came out on the road with Jesus with nothing in their pockets. And down the road they went. He says, what are we going to have? Verily I say unto you, you have followed me in the regeneration when the Son of Man shall sit on the throne of His glory. You shall sit on 12 thrones, judging the 12 tribes of Israel. And every one who has forsaken houses, or brothers, or sisters, or father, or mother, or wife, or children, or land, for my name's sake, shall receive 100-fold, and shall inherit everlasting life. But many that are first shall be last, and the last shall be first. One of the things that provoked this line of thought in my mind over the last couple of days is an article I read recently in the latest edition of the Intercollegiate Review by Mark Maravasi, and he had this to say: "It has in some ways become more difficult to believe in the historical and human attributes of Christ, which requires the emulation of his conduct, than it is to believe in the eternal and divine attributes of Christ, which may require nothing more than credulity. At the end of the 20th century, therefore, we suffer the consequences of an almost total emancipation from the moral heritage of Christianity." Now, do you realize what this man is saying? He's saying, it's come to the place in our generation where it may be more difficult, harder to believe in the historical and human attributes of Christ, because these require emulation. They require us to do the things that Jesus did. They require us to do the things Jesus said to do. They require the imitation of Christ. They require the following of Christ. They require the asking of questions like, what would Jesus do if he were in this situation? Would Jesus be here? Would Jesus take this? Would Jesus say this? In every aspect of our lives, if we face up to the human and historical Jesus, because this is what he did and this is what he taught. On the other hand, he says it may be easier to accept the eternal and the divine attributes of Christ. It may be better to argue and debate endlessly about the Trinity or the unity of God or the nature of God or the relationship of Christ to God and who is sitting on whose right hand in the heavenly places. We may be able, in the course of our doctrinal discussion, to discuss things Jewish and things Gentile, and to go all the way up and down the line of all of the theoretical and doctrinal attributes of God. But all that requires is a set of beliefs. We can tack a set of beliefs on the wall over here. We can have a creed for this church. We believe that, and we can bang, 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 bang. And all you have to do to be a member of our church is to believe these things. Would it be different if we had a set of things tacked on the wall that were the things Jesus did and commanded and said, in order to be a member of this church, you must do these things? This is the distinction that this gentleman is drawing at this place. And he says, it's part of a much, much longer article dealing with the problems in our society and why it is we have some of them, is the fact that that Christianity, per se, has tended to move away from the historical human Jesus into the metaphorical, heavenly, divine, abstract Jesus, in whom they only have to believe, whom they do not have to emulate. And as a result, he says, we suffer the consequences of an almost total emancipation from the moral consequences of Christianity. And we see it on every side of us. This nation was, believe it or not, and hate it as people may, established as a Christian nation. And it was based upon the ideas and the ideals of one Jesus Christ, in whom all the founding fathers believed, basically, with some exceptions who believed, but they still believed in the God of the Bible as opposed to somebody else. And so they also believed in the direct human consequences and moral consequences of obedience to and submission to that God. That is all but gone from public life in our society and in our day. And we're suffering the consequences from it every time we turn around. More than that, though, it has invaded our own minds, our own hearts, this approach to God. We have been infiltrated by the enemy and don't even realize it's been done so. And Jesus, consequently, gives us a statement like this that we have to struggle with. If any man comes to me and hates not his father and mother and wife and children and brothers, yes, and his own life also, he cannot be my disciple. That's what he said. It's a tall order, and one that we, I think, have faced only in the abstract, only in the general terms. When I was counsel for baptism, the minister read this section to me from Luke 14 about counting the cost. And I readily, perhaps too readily, agreed that I had counted the cost and that I was willing to pay it. And I remember, in fact, at the time, my reaction was, I don't have any choice. What do you mean count the cost? I mean, now that I see these things, there's no choice involved in what it is that I've got to do. But the cost that was presented to me was mostly hypothetical. It had to do with with faithfulness to God in the face of future persecution. If you got a bayonet in your belly, and it's a question of obey God or die, what are you going to do? And if you're in a country that's being, overrun by Muslims, and they accept Islam or die, what are you going to do? These are tough questions. Nah. They're easy questions to answer here and now. Today, oh, sure, go ahead, kill me, would be our response. That's not that hard. Little was discussed when this was discussed with me originally about the here and about the now. If any man come to me now and hate not his father and his mother and wife and children and brothers and sisters and his own life also, he cannot be my disciple. As tough as this may be, maybe we ought to look at it in simpler terms. Maybe we should say this: unless you're willing to forsake something that's of value to you, you can't be my disciple. Now, not tomorrow, not maybe, not someday. Now, is there absolutely nothing that's required of us now? Is there no righteousness, no discipline that's required of us now that we need to measure up to? No sacrifice that we need to make now, that we can make this, so we can count the cost about what it's going to cost us to serve Christ in abstract terms about some far-off challenge we may or may not ever face? Or should we not face this question now, today, in things that we may have to deal with in our lives? I'd like for us to just take a look at something. If you'll come back to Luke 14 again, this time to the beginning of the chapter. Now, this isn't a unified set from verse 1 all the way through the part that I read to you in verse 14, but Luke has put them together, and we'll just take them together and on the basis of what Luke gave to us. Because the first part of this chapter is all about a dinner he had at a Pharisee's house. The second part, he's apparently left the Pharisee's house, and he's got a crowd of people following him when he turns around and says, you've got to be willing, if you're going to follow me like this, you've got to be willing to forsake your father, your mother, and your own life. So let's get used to the idea. Get with it. But before he ever got to that, in chapter 14, verse 1, it says this: It came to pass as he went to the house of one of the chief Pharisees, to eat bread on the Sabbath day, they watched him. Oh, they were always watching him to see what he would do. And behold, there was a certain man before him which had the dropsy. Dropsy is a severe form of edema, I understand. And Jesus, answering, spoke to the lawyers and Pharisees, saying, Is it lawful to heal on the Sabbath day? And they wouldn't answer him. By this time they've kind of learned, I guess, that you need to be careful what you say to this man, because he may make you eat it. They held their peace. So he took the man and healed him and let him go. And he answered and said, Which of you shall have an ass or an ox that has fallen into a pit, and will not straightway put him out on the Sabbath day? And they couldn't answer him these things. Now, what Jesus is here saying is that there are certain obligations that come your way. And again, we're looking at the human historic Jesus here, who actually did something on the Sabbath day. And this is the man we are supposed to emulate. And what this man says to these people, essentially what he's challenging is a rule of their own regarding the Sabbath day, which said that man was not to heal on the Sabbath day. It's incredible. They could acknowledge the fact that a human being might be able to heal another person, but they forbade him to do so on the Sabbath day, which made the Sabbath day greater than the solving of a human need or a human problem. Jesus didn't reject the Sabbath day, but what he did was challenge their assumptions on the Sabbath day and say, why do you do this? How is it that you can say it's okay? And if this happened in many things, you've got an ox or an ass that falls in a pit, we'll go out there and get him out. But we won't do this for a poor man like this. A man in one case that had a withered hand, or somebody that was bowed over with a spirit of infirmity. And all the Sabbath healings of Jesus, seems like, there's 7 of them, major Sabbath healings of Jesus that are mentioned in the Bible. All of which he establishes that it's right for us to be concerned with human suffering and to help people on the Sabbath day in this way, yet at the same time accepting the law of the Sabbath. The Sabbath is to be obeyed. Jesus left the written law standing as a firm background, and I'll come back to that in a little bit later. But for right now, it was a firm foundation for the remainder of the law and for human conduct. But he makes it clear you've got to make certain decisions regarding welfare on this day. And he put forth a parable to those that were bidden. Here we are. Remember, we're in a Pharisee's house, one of the chief Pharisees, and he's a well-to-do man. He's had a feast. It's on the Sabbath day. All the work has been done. The food's been prepared. They're just coming over to his place to eat on the Sabbath day. He looked around. He noticed those who were bidden and marked how they chose out the chief room, saying to them, "When you are bidden of any man to a wedding, sit not in the highest room, lest a more honorable man than you be bidden of him. And he that invited you, in this case, comes and says to you," I'm sorry, I've slipped it. I'm sorry. He marked how they chose the chief room, saying to them, "When you are bidden of any man to a wedding, sit not down in the highest room, lest a more honorable man than you be bidden of him. And he that invited you will come to you and saying, 'Make room for this guy. This is where he is supposed to be sitting. You're not supposed to sit here.' And you begin with shame to take the lowest room." Now, from your own perspective, this is a good idea because nobody wants to face this kind of embarrassment, right? But when you are invited, go and sit down in the lowest room, that he that bade you comes, he may say unto you, 'Friend, go up higher. Then you shall have worship in the presence of them that sit at meat with you.'" Now, here's a question mark. I don't know at what the last time in your life you had an occasion to do this was, but this is the pattern that Jesus laid down for us, and he says, I expect you to do this. I expect you to take the lowest room. I expect you to take the least seat. I expect you to defer to other people and to not honor yourself, but to honor others in the way you live your life. Okay? This is one thing you have to forsake if you're going to follow Christ, and that is the exaltation of the self. Read what he says. "Whoever exalts himself shall be abased. He that humbles himself shall be exalted." Now, this is one of the things, and possibly in many ways one of the hardest things, that a Christian has to forsake. The temptation to self-exaltation. And so, if any man come after me, whosoever will not forsake his temptation to exalt himself, he cannot be my disciple. Now, you've got to do this. You've got to count the cost. And you've got to say, I have to begin deferring to other people. I have to let someone else go before me. I have to wait on others. I have to serve other people. I cannot exalt myself. This is a requirement of Christians because we're supposed to live like he lived. Then he said to him that invited him, "When you make a dinner or a supper, don't call your friends or just your brethren, neither your kinsmen nor your rich neighbors, lest they also invite you back and a recompense be made to you." You do realize, he says, don't you, that when you invite all these people over to your place, they're going to invite you back, and you have given no one anything, because there will be a recompense that comes back to you. Now, when you're going to give something, you have got to give something in a way that there's no recompense to you, or else it's not a gift. Fair? Okay. He said, "When you make a feast, call the poor, the maimed, the blind, the lame, and you shall be blessed, for they cannot recompense you, for you shall be recompensed at the resurrection of the just." Now, here is a plain and simple teaching of Jesus Christ. That when the time comes to give, don't assume that when you're going to give to somebody who's going to give something back to you that you have done anything virtuous at all. You haven't. Get this straight. You have got to forsake that approach to life. It doesn't mean you don't give things to people. If a friend of yours on his birthday, because you think he will give something to me on my birthday, therefore I shouldn't give it to. That's not the point. The point is this, that you have got to find ways to give to people who can't give back, or you haven't given anything. And this is a fundamental teaching of Jesus Christ. And it's one of the aspects of the forsaking of possessions, the forsaking of the things that you have. I can give another time perhaps all the justifications for why it is that we don't have to sell everything we have, put on rags, and go out and live in the world on the street somewhere. But that's not the point. The point is, if you're not willing to forsake everything, are you willing to forsake something? Are we going to come to make even the smallest step toward giving with no hope of anything coming back to us, because this is what Jesus says we are supposed to do. It's what he did. It's the way he lived his life, and he expects his disciples to do likewise. And since what he was going to be doing for the next however many months was walking up and down the dusty roads of Galilee and Judea, preaching, healing, and teaching, and this young man comes to him and says, "Lord, what must I do to be saved?" He says, "Go and sell all you have and come follow me." The young man had to get completely unencumbered if he was going to follow Christ, because he had no cell phone to keep his business going. Couldn't pop in and pick up his email to see how things were going back at the ranch. He had to completely unencumber himself because he was going on the road with the Messiah. I can't help but think it's possible, because Jesus really loved this young man when he looked at him, it's possible that he might have been one of the 12 if he had been able to make that decision. He couldn't. I've thought about it many times. I don't think that it was a completely selfish decision on his part, because he had responsibilities. He had a payroll that had to be met. He walks away from it. Who knows what happens to all of his servants, all of his household, his family. That was of concern to him. And whosoever he be among you who forsakes not all that he has, father, mother, wife, children, he can't be my disciple. Now, I don't know what your burden is, and I don't think it's the same for all of us at all. I don't know what is out there in your life that is a burden or an obstacle or is in the way of your following Jesus Christ. But how can we even start talking about your willingness to give up everything for God unless or until we have gotten past the giving up of something that stands in the way? Just one thing that stands in the way. We got to the place to where we were dealing with some place where it has to do with the way we live our life instead of just what we believe or how we think or how we feel about things and people. This is what the man who wrote the article I was quoted was driving at, and this is what Jesus is driving at when he talks about whoever he be that forsakes not all that he has, he can't be my disciple. Anyway, he then said in verse 50, it says in verse 15, one of them that sat at meat with him heard these things and said, "Blessed is he that shall eat bread in the kingdom of God." And he said to him, "A certain man made a great supper, and he bade many. And he sent his servant at supper time to say unto those that were bidden, Come, get on down here, everything is ready. And they all began with one consent to make excuse. The first said to him, I bought a piece of ground, and I must needs go see it. I pray you have me excused. Another said, I have bought 5 yoke of oxen. I go to prove them. I pray you have me excused. Another said, I have married a wife, and I can't come. And the servant came and showed his lord these things. The master of the house became angry and said to his servant, Go out quickly into the streets and the lanes of the city, and bring in hither the poor, the maimed, the halt, the blind. Then the servant did that, and he said, It's done. As you commanded, we still got room. And the Lord said to the servant, Go to the highways and the hedges. Get the guys out from under the bridge down there, the homeless people. Compel them to come in. Grab them by the scruff of the neck and bring them in here, that my house may be filled. For I say unto you, none of those wicked men who were bidden shall taste of my supper. Now, behold, as Paul said, both the goodness and the severity of God. The fact that the door is open to us freely in the first place, the invitation is extended, is an absolute of grace of God and has no strings attached. But when that invitation is not accepted, when one begins to make excuses, and it's interesting that these excuses have to do with the things that we are just not willing to forsake. Can't walk away from the land. Can't walk away from my business. Can't walk away from all these things. I can't give these things up in the service of Christ. Well, these are the people he calls wicked and says they're not going to taste of my supper. They were invited and they made excuses and they can't come. I would really like to tell you that it's easier than that. I would really like to tell you that you can go on into the kingdom of God encumbered as you are. But I'm sorry. If I'm going to be faithful to the words of Jesus, I've got to tell you the truth. And the truth is that the calling of God is free, salvation is free, justification is free. But having had that, God has certain expectations of your behavior, the way you live your life, what you commit yourself to, the decisions that you make. He has expectations of you, and if you do not meet these expectations, you are not going to be in the kingdom of God. Now, maybe a little fear of God is a good thing. Because I don't, I never have wanted this. Anybody could tell you they wanted to be one who preaches fear. Because, that's not really the main motivation that should drive a person. But maybe at some point in time, the Bible does say the fear of the Lord is clean. And maybe at some point we need the fear of God to cause us to stop and look around ourselves and consider what our values are and what it is that we're trying to get done in our lives and the lives of the people around us. Well, he said there went great multitudes with him, and he turned and said, and here we are where we came to before. If any man come to me and hate not his father and his mother and his wife and his children and brethren and sisters, even his own life, he can't be my disciple. So you begin to get a picture here of the sort of thing and sort of demands that God is going to make on our lives. So, before we get to the question of forsaking all things, we return to the question of forsaking something, of measuring up to something that's expected of God. We come to the question of accepting, though perhaps more than ever, the authority of Jesus Christ in our lives, of doing the things that Jesus said, of imitating the way he lived his life, of being followers of him, imitators of him, emulating Christ as he lived his life and as he carried on his ministry. If you turn back to a really familiar scripture, the 5th chapter of Matthew, I want to try to make something perhaps a little clearer. In Matthew, we have this marvelous set of Beatitudes which have a great deal to do with what Jesus said about what makes a man happy. The Beatitudes, blessed is the man, means happy is the man. These are the things that will lead you to happiness. And he lists down through here all sorts of things that we should give our attention to and think about. These have been preached on, forevermore, and so I won't go through them again today. I'll leave it to you to think about them, though, in this line, that to emulate Christ, to imitate Christ, to follow him, these are the patterns of attitudes of life that he expects to see in his disciples as we go on our way. He comes back in verse 13, though, and says, you're the salt of the earth. He'd used this illustration of the salt elsewhere. If the salt has lost its savor, it's good for nothing. The point being is that you've got to be useful in this world, not merely decorative. There's got to be some value in what you are, what you do, and how you live your life. And then he comes down, having said you're the light of the world, and verse 17 he says, don't think I have come to destroy the law. I have not come to destroy the law. I have come to fulfill the law. Now, I asked the question earlier, and it has struck me from this book, and this is where the rubber meets the road. You say to yourself, yes, I am willing to come under the authority of Jesus Christ. I accept Jesus Christ as my Savior. I pray the sinner's prayer. I ask for God's forgiveness. I want my life to be cleaned up, okay? Now, from this day forward, how do I live my life under the authority of Jesus Christ? How can I know at each turn in the road of my life what is the right thing to do and what is the wrong thing to do? Well, I've heard people say, well, the Holy Spirit will guide me in that. Fair enough. I have no problem with that. There's one thing, though. Jesus said concerning the Holy Spirit that the Holy Spirit would bring to remembrance all the things that I have taught you. Now, here's my problem. If you were never taught it, if you never learned it, how can the Holy Spirit help you remember something you never knew? That doesn't work. The fact of the matter is that unless your conscience is educated and informed, the Holy Spirit doesn't have anything in you to work with. And that's why Jesus says what he says here. Don't think I am come to destroy the law or the prophets. I am not come to destroy them. I'm come to fulfill them. Now, what did he mean by that? Well, basically, some people take it to mean, well, I didn't come to destroy them, I came to fulfill them, which basically is the same thing as destroying them. That I'll fulfill them and they won't have to keep them anymore or take these things into account anymore. But there's something, intuitively, you should know that there's something wrong with this. That if it was wrong to commit adultery in the Old Testament, then it's still wrong to commit adultery. You should know that if it was wrong to lie in the Old Testament, then it's still wrong in the New Testament. And Jesus then goes on he makes this statement, "Verily I say unto you, till heaven and earth pass, one jot or one tittle shall in no wise pass from the law till everything has come to pass." Now, the very use of the word jot and tittle is very important because it means that he's talking about the written law. His audience would have caught this immediately because they made the distinction between the written law and the oral law. The oral law being the traditions, what the New Testament writers call the traditions of the Jews, all of which were developed over time to explain the written law. Jesus is just about, in the Sermon on the Mount, to conflict with a great deal of what these people thought was the oral law. However, they would not be surprised at that because rabbis did that all the time. And they argued about the meaning of the written and the oral law. But what Jesus is telling us here is that the written law of God is permanent. Now, you may not always keep it the same way. It may not even always be possible for you to keep it the same way. But I have not come to do away with one jot or one tittle from that law. We have something not dissimilar to that in our own Constitution. Because you cannot erase anything from the Constitution of the United States. You can't do it. You can't pass a law, a resolution, or anything. You can amend it. But the way you amend it is by creating a new amendment that supersedes a preceding amendment. If you go back and look at the Constitution of the United States, wasn't it the 18th Amendment, the one about prohibition? Still there. It's still there. It's in the Constitution. But a little bit further down, I don't remember, is it the 21st or somewhere in there, is another amendment that supersedes the previous amendment. And not one jot, not one tittle has passed from the Constitution. Now, this isn't exactly an analogy with the Old Testament law, but it's similar. The fact is that the written law is the skeleton. It's the framework upon which all of the law of God, the natural law of God, is built, and out of which every interpretation of the law must be drawn. Jesus is about to, in the Sermon on the Mount, to engage in serious reinterpretations of many of the Old Testament laws of the Ten Commandments. They are extremely serious in view of the interpretations that were common in the society at that time. Because in Jesus' teachings, and he had the authority to teach it, the rabbis had made serious errors in the way in which they had gone about interpreting the written law. So he says, let's don't misunderstand each other right from the start. Not one jot, not one tittle is going to pass from the written law until everything has come to pass. Not till heaven and earth pass. Nothing is going to pass from the written law till everything has come to pass. Whosoever, therefore, shall break one of these least commandments and shall teach men so, he shall be called least in the kingdom of heaven. Whosoever shall do and teach them shall be called great in the kingdom of heaven. So there's nothing wrong with the written law. That's not our problem here, folks. Our problem is with the way we live it and the way we interpret it and the way we take those responsibilities on ourselves. He then proceeds throughout the Sermon on the Mount to develop these themes, which you and I look back to this day, and we have to understand that if we are going to come under the authority of Jesus Christ, we call him Master and Lord. Well, that means we're under his authority. And if we're going to claim to be under his authority, we're supposed to do what he said. You have heard it said by them of old time, you shall not kill, and whosoever shall kill shall be in danger of the judgment. But I say unto you that whoever is angry with his brother without a cause shall be in danger of the judgment. Whoever shall say Raka, actually with your voice, say Raka to the man, shall be in danger of the Sanhedrin. Whosoever shall say, you fool, to his face, shall be in danger of hellfire. This is what Jesus said. You don't go calling people names to their face. Now, it doesn't mean that if a man is a fool that you can't recognize that that's a fact. So what is he talking about? Well, it's because that it is out of the face-to-face confrontations when we say nasty things to people, like Raka or you fool, that the punch in the nose comes, that calls for retaliation, that may lead to fights and can ultimately lead to murder, and has in many cases, in which case you're going to be in danger of hellfire. Now, what Jesus is trying to tell us here is that we as Christians, as followers of Christ, have got to learn the Christian way of responding to people in conflicts that exist in this world. So he says, therefore, because of what I told you before, if you bring your gift to the altar, and you remember there that your brother has something against you, leave there your gift before the altar and go your way and be reconciled to your brother, and then come and offer your gift. This is Christianity 101. Now, what are we going to have to do? Whosoever would come after me, let him forsake his father, his mother, his wife, his children, and his own life also, and come and follow me. Okay, all these things are kind of extreme and out there. Let's get to something more basic. If you're going to follow Christ, you're going to have to forsake your pride. Your pride. Because it is pride, for the most part, that prevents us from being reconciled to our brother. The unwillingness to say, I'm sorry, I was wrong. Now what Jesus has given us here is the extreme illustration that if you're all the way to the temple, you're all the way up there, and you're going to offer your gift, you're going to be reconciled to God with this gift you're going to be offering to God up here, and you remember when you're right there at the place that you have not been reconciled with your brother, there's no point in continuing with this effort of trying to be reconciled with God. Leave your gift there, turn around, go be reconciled to your brother, then come and offer your gift. You want to follow Christ? You've got to forsake your pride. You've got to forsake that ego that once a barrier has been created, an offense created between me and my brother, that I will let it sit there and fester. If I remember it, even at the altar of God, I am supposed to do something about it now. Well, we're not there yet. You know, we are at church, and after a while it'll be after church, and we'll go home tonight. And we may remember before we go to bed, or we may remember on getting up first thing in the morning, or we may remember at lunch tomorrow that we have not been reconciled to our brother. Leave your lunch. Go be reconciled to your brother, and then come and eat your lunch. This is what Jesus said we're supposed to do. Now, this is what also this gentleman was driving at when he said, it seems to become harder for us to deal with the historic and human Jesus, because that means we have to emulate what he's done. It is easier for us to relate to the heavenly, divine Jesus in the abstract, where we only have to sort of believe certain things, maybe a set of doctrines or creeds, in order to claim to be his disciples. We only have to learn things from him to be his disciples. We don't have to actually live like he lived and walk like he walked and do the things that he did. When I read these things, I really have to conclude Jesus really expects us to do this kind of thing. Then he goes on to say, agree with your adversary quickly while you're in the way with him, lest at any time the adversary deliver you to the judge deliver you to the officer, and you be cast into prison. I'm going to tell you the truth. You're not coming out of there until you've paid the last farthing. Don't come to me praying to be gotten out, because you had the opportunity to deal with this before you got there. So if you remember the problem, go deal with the problem. Don't let it sit there and fester and hope you're going to get away with it. Deal with the problem. Now, of course, if you're not a disciple of Jesus, you don't pay any attention to this. If he is not your Lord and Master, you are perfectly free to ignore this. But if Jesus is your Lord, if he is your Master, you're not free to ignore this. You must come under his authority. And if you are under his authority, you must do what he did and do what he said, or else you can't claim to be his disciple. Aren't these simple? It's pretty straightforward stuff. I don't think I'm creating something out of thin air here that doesn't have a pretty sound basis in the teachings of Jesus himself. I'm fearful that a lot of us have followed the spirit of the age in charging off into a more freewheeling. In our age, authority is a bad thing, and none of us want to be under authority. And having seen authority abused, we don't want to have anything to do with authority anymore. The problem with that is, you can do that all you wish about human authority, but unless or until you are prepared to come under the authority of Jesus, you can't be Jesus' disciple. And coming under the authority of Jesus is going to cost you something. There is no way around that. And unless you're prepared to pay it, don't start down that road. Don't even make the start. It is better for you not to start in the first place than to make that start and then turn back from it. Now I realize, in speaking to you people here, I'm speaking to the choir, and you really don't have any choice any longer, because you have started down that road. Your problem that you face maybe today is, I've started, haven't got very far. And now it's time to take a new look at the teachings of Jesus and to realize that there are, in reality, some very serious requirements laid upon people who are going to be his disciples. Now, I want you to turn back with me in conclusion right to the end of the New Testament, to the book of Revelation. Let's get down to where it all pays out, as it were. Revelation chapter 21. He says, I saw a new heaven and a new earth. For the first heaven and the first earth were passed away, and there was no more sea. And I, John, saw the holy city, New Jerusalem, coming down from God out of heaven, prepared like a bride for her husband. I heard a great voice out of heaven saying, Behold, the tabernacle of God is with men, and he will dwell with them, and they shall be his people, and God himself shall be with them and be their God. And God shall wipe away all tears from their eyes. There shall be no more death, neither sorrow nor crying, neither shall there be any more pain, for the former things are passed away. And he that sat upon the throne said, Behold, I make all things new. You write that down, because these are true and faithful sayings. I am Alpha and Omega, the beginning and the end. I will give to him that is athirst of the fountain of the water of life, that he may drink freely. That means you're going to live forever. He that overcomes shall inherit all things, and I will be his God, and he will be my son. This is what all of us hope for, yearn for, and desire. But listen to what he says. Let the fearful and unbelieving and abominable, murderers, whoremongers, sorcerers, idolaters, and all liars shall have their part in the lake that burns with fire and brimstone, which is the second death. I don't know who those people might be, but I do realize I have to face up to the fact it's possible to be one of them. And I have to realize that what I do does make a difference. That I can't live my life just any old way I want to live it and be in this kingdom at that time free to drink of the water of life freely. I've got to overcome. Did you miss that word? He that overcomes shall inherit all things, and I will be his God, and he will be my son. You got to win. You have to face these challenges, and you have to live the way Jesus. And the way you're going to win is to live the way that Jesus lived, and to live the way that Jesus taught. Finally, in Revelation 22, verse 17. Actually, verse 13. I am Alpha and Omega, the beginning and the end, the first and the last. Blessed are they that do his commandments, that they may have a right to the tree of life and may enter in through the gates of the city. Who are blessed? They that do his commandments. Not just those people that believed on him in some abstract way. Not someone who held the right set of doctrinal beliefs. It's those who actually did the things that he said to do. That they may have right to the tree of life and enter in through the gates of the city. That's what's required of us, brethren, is that we keep his commandments and do these things. For on the outside are dogs, sorcerers, whoremongers, murderers, idolaters, and whosoever loves and makes a lie. There are people who are in, there are people who are out, and the people who are in and the people who are out are differentiated by the fact that they keep the commandments of God. Not that hard. I, Jesus, have sent my angel to testify to these things in the churches. I am the root, the offspring of David, the bright and the morning star. The Spirit and the bride say, Come. Let him that hears say, Come. And whosoever will, let him come and take of the water of life freely. For I testify to every man that hears the words of the prophecy of this book. If any man shall add to these things, God shall add to him the plagues that are written in the book. Go back and read those. If any man shall take away from the words of the book of this prophecy, God shall take away his part out of the book of life, which suggests his name might have been there, but he took away from the words of the prophecy. He took and taken out of the book of life, out of the holy city, and from the things that are written in this book. He that testifies these things says, Surely I come quickly. And John replies, Even so come, Lord Jesus.